And we're live. Welcome, everybody, back to another weekly JavaScript training. This week, I am joined by Matthew Phillips, a
Hello.
core Dun.js contributor and the main guy on Steel.js, which is Steel and Steel Tools. This week, we are going to be talking about NPM packages and the Modlet workflow. My goal is to, I'm going to work on like a player page. I'm gonna make like a player details page in my Bitballs my Bitballs application that we do for raising money for stroke awareness, and I'm gonna build that player profile page with the Modlet approach, which Modlets are there for. How would you describe Modlets, Matthew?
How to describe modlets? Modlet is, I would just use other words for modlet, like they are components or they are module. Well, they're everything that a module needs to know that it's working. They're like mini projects, I would say. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's so like it's kind of there's the old Java term applet, which is like a mini application, and we converted that to Modlet, which is like, I don't know, it's not a mini module, so maybe the word actually doesn't make sense.
It's like the opposite of that.
It invokes the same ideas of applet. It's like you have this like little, almost mini application which has its own tests, its own documentation, its own demo page, its source, and everything in just one folder. And that's how we build everything at Bitovi for the most part. Sometimes our models won't have their own folder, but most everything else does. And then there's taking, of course, the Modlet approach to its fullest extreme, and that's giving every single module its own repository, its own NPM package, and everything like that. When you take it to that extreme, that's a little benefit of Modlets, where you can make sure everything has its own tests, its own documentation, but now you can easily share that module across other projects. So those are some really good benefits, and this is largely the workflow we use. So I'm gonna make like I don't know, I was thinking just like a
So are you gonna do both? Or are you gonna do like a Modlet and then a NPM
we're
package?
gonna go for it all. So I'm gonna start with I'm gonna start a little bit of the Modlet, just kind of show what's there. And how to create one, and then I'm going to go into like before I've even I just kind of get the basics of the Modlet started, and then I'm going to go into how to create a NPM package and then import that into my bigger project. So we've got a lot to do, and we've got 55 minutes to do it in. So let's get started.
So what's your belief? We might have talked about this before, but like, what do you do first when you work on a new Modlet? Like, what's the first thing to do?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the type of Modlet. So let's kind of create let's first show our app, and we'll talk about that in 1 second. Let me make sure my app is actually running. It is, and I have some players here, and what I want to be able to do is click on a player and have it take me to actually like a player profile page. So the player profile page will take like a player's ID, and I want it to show that player. Like it'll show their stats, things like that, so they can brag about who's the best basketball player. Okay. So all of my other modules are built in general with the Modlet. They have a test, they have a demo page, they have the actual JavaScript module, they have any styles or templates that the Modlet uses, and then they have a test page that runs just its tests. In here, we don't have our documentation, but we should. If this was not something I was kind of hacking together on weekends, I definitely would have that. So let's talk about. That's a really good question, Matthew. I kind of start I think the best place to start is definitely not writing the Modlet. There's kind of three places I think that make the most sense to start. And it depends on what you're building. There's the test.
Yeah, did you say all the things that make up a Modlet?
Yeah, I went over it.
Okay.
But yeah, I just skimmed through it. But there's your test. This should have a details.markdown if we were being really good right here.
Yeah.
There's a documentation page. There's documentation for Modlet. There's the demo page, which shows like an actual working example. So I can actually show that off here. So if I go to components, which one was that I was actually looking at? I was looking at game details, but let's look at player because we'll be inside there anyways. Player edit. There's no player create. I don't know why my thing is showing me that. Player edit, or edit.html typically.
See, this is a very CRUD app. Let's see, it's very Ruby on Rails kind of inspired.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of times how I organize things. Well, it's CRUD because I'm not a designer, so I'm not like making slick interfaces that can go beyond that. So here, I'm going to focus not on this game, but I'm going to do player edit because it's going to be very similar to show. This should have a edit.markdown. So here's the demo page, this edit.html. There's a documentation that it's supposed to have, which would be edit.markdown, which would kind of detail what this module provides and does. Sometimes you can also do this inline inside the actual module too. And then it has a test page, which should be able to run just this module's tests.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like it's working. And then there's everything else that it might want. This one, it looks like someone wanted to create the view model in an independent file. But it's really your main module is going to be named the same thing as the folder, and then this will require everything else that it needs. Okay, so we want to build the player details. So I need a details folder. Now, I could use Dun.js's generators to generate this player detail. But I'm not going to, mostly because this is the old one. I think it's better to learn and kind of see it being created one at a time. But also because this is using an old version of Dun.js, and I'm afraid to use its generators. The new ones work much better, but I don't. It's just not worth it. So Matthew asked the question, what do you build first? I think it depends on a lot of things. Like if you really know what your API looks like, then I think you go straight to making tests.
Tests, yeah.
If you don't know what your API looks like and you kind of want to play with it and kind of see what it's going to look like for people, I think the demo page is actually where I start a lot of times, because that gives you like the quickest access to kind of start playing with ideas. So I'm going to start with the demo page first. Before I make it, sometimes I'll start with documentation as well. I'll do documentation-driven development if the demo page doesn't make sense. This is something like I'm working on kind of like helpers that don't have a visual aspect to them. And the demo page doesn't make sense, then I'll definitely start with documentation. I don't know, it's just kind of what you think, it's like what you think your biggest gap of understanding is, that's where you should start. If you really don't know what the API should look like or really where to begin, then docs and demo pages are really great, but then you should start transitioning to tests as soon as possible as well. But I'm going to start with the demo page. I'm going to make a detail.html. And what I need always is Steel.js. So I'm going to create a script tag that points to Steel. Where am I? One more. So I'm going to point it at node modules. Steel.js. And I'm going to say, you can actually write imports in JavaScript code inside this script tag. And what Steel will do is automatically execute that after Steel has loaded. Is this needed? I think it is, right?
Yeah, I think so.
We should probably make it smart enough where it really doesn't matter. But I need to specify Steel, don't load any main modules, because really what we want inside here is technically our main module. So what do I want I'm going to create a stash template. And this is where I'm going to have my playground for the custom element that I'm creating, which is the player detail custom element. So really what I want my player detail to look like is I'm going to have player detail. And I think I'm just going to pass it a
player?
I think I'll just pass it, not the player, but the player ID. So that way it works fine if like the route, it's just getting that route from the route, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So with the new CanJS 2.3 syntax, I would probably, I probably only need one-way binding. I would write it player ID equals some ID. And that's all I would need. But since, again, this is not, I haven't updated this yet.
Oh, no.
I know, I will soon. I'm going to write it the old way.
Updated my stat project last night.
Well, good for you. I will probably do that this weekend if I have time. So that's probably all I want, and I just need this ID to be passed to it. So what I'll probably do is I need to import the actual component. I could use CanView auto render, but I'm not going to because there's no real point. I'm going to import CanView. I'm going to import the actual detail module, which will be bitballs components player detail. And then I'm going to probably just give this an ID. Probably could just use CanView auto render.
We need to, I know we've talked about this, we need to have where with Can auto render you can specify a view model.
Yeah. I've been looking at the bindings and I think it's possible to actually make it so that the bindings can listen to if the view model changes and just kind of redo everything, which would be cool.
But it'd be cool if you could export something from this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have that be used. But,
in this case, it's not needed because what I can do is I'm going to get this object here, which I'm going to call I don't know, main or something, or template. I don't know. Template's a horrible name, but I'm just not creating it right now. I'm going to get that, and I'm going to get its view model. There's a default can map created whenever you put can auto render on anything. So I'm going to get that, and I'm just going to add an ID property and make it like 5. Now, there's one other thing I want to do to this, which is I'm going to import can fixture. Which I think is what we're using in all of these other ones. Just the normal can fixture.
You know, you really should be importing bitballs component player detail in the template.
Yeah, I could. It doesn't matter?
I guess it doesn't matter.
I might, actually. Well,
Just seems more correct to me.
All right, sure. Yeah, that's true, because the template more depends on it. Okay, so can import from now this makes the template actually depend on.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know that this is going to load player 5. So I'm going to make can fixture. Probably need jQuery in here. I'm going to make can fixture handle the request for players. My models makes a request to services players, so I need to handle a get request, which is going to make service players and an ID. And I'm going to pass it a response function. This just has the player information, and I can't even remember, because it's been so while since I've gotten to this application, exactly what players look like, but I think this fixtures. Let's see if there's a player in here. So I can probably just steal this. I could actually just import this, which actually is even easier than rewriting it. So I'm just going to do that.
Yeah.
This is models. This is going to be Bitballs models fixtures player. So Bitballs models fixtures player. So now I have my player. Of course, which one was it returning, just so we make sure it's not all super confused. It was returning player ID 1. So I'm going to change this to 1. Okay, so that's a good, reasonable test. I hope this will work when I eventually get the thing to actually work, to actually implement the module, which we will do in a second. But next, I want to write the test. So I'm going to create a detail test, and I'm going to use, actually, I think we're using the rest of this project, require.js. Oh, no, I'm not. I thought I was. No? Oh, yeah. Okay, I guess most of this project, we're mixed bag because I've been using this project as a training, so some people have been deciding to write it in one module syntax versus another.
Steel's fine with that.
Yeah, Steel is totally fine with that. Works totally okay. But I prefer to actually use require.js, and there's a long, complex. Huh?
Common.js.
Sorry, Common.js. Yeah, there's a long, complex reason for that, which I don't want to go into now. Using ES6 is totally fine, but it's almost at the level of tabs versus spaces, where I kind of believe. Well, I'll give the short answer. I kind of believe that Common.js is more stable. So until a spec is out. It's fun to play with the ES6 syntax, but Common.js is going nowhere. So I think it's just better to use.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I use it as well. But I mean, for me, it's mostly I just don't want the compilation overhead of ES6.
Oh yeah, that too. So I'm going to require Steel QUnit, which is something we made to work great with a version of QUnit we made that works really great with Steel. It essentially waits for all tests to be done. And then I need to import my component. So I'm going to, I don't really need to, I can just require detail, which we haven't created yet. And then I am going to get just can, I need stash probably. Well, if I'm going to test its view model and not, it depends if I'm going to do more of like a functional test right here, or I'm going to do just the unit test of the view model. For now, let's just do the view model. So for that, I can do.
We don't really know anything about the view model yet, though.
I do because I'm doing test-driven development.
Okay, we're going to decide right now. Okay.
I'm going to decide right now what I want the view model to look like. Now, I could work on some documentation for it if I really wanted. So I could create. I'm going to do the documentation inline. So I'm going to have a can map in here, and I'm going to call this view model, or I'm going to call it detail view model. And I'm going to, there's going to be some behaviors to this, but the real behavior that I want is that if I set a player ID, there's going to be a player promise value that I can read, and probably a player. So I know there's some kind of custom attributes that I'm going to want, so I could just kind of start the documentation. So I know there's going to be a property that's a promise value that has as its resolved value a player. And yes, last week we saw how to do some documentation. So I did not actually document player. I documented like game or something like that. Which one was it? Session? Okay, session. So if assuming I'm going to document player the same way at some point, I'm going to say this is, I'm going to give the title of the mod, I'm going to give the module that this thing is going to resolve to, which is going to be essentially the player module. And I might say, well, I'll just put a skeleton here so the documentation picks it up. So this can be done with the define plugin. There's going to be a player promise. And this is what I'll be documenting here. Player promise, and there's also going to be, let's just say there's a player. This thing's value is actually this.
Player model.
The player model. Okay. Now, if I were being good, yeah, I could write up actual documentation, but in reality, I would probably not. Mostly because to me, this just enough would be self-evident. Like, I think that most people, if they just saw the name here and had enough of the description of the type here, this is going to be so simple, the behavior that I'm adding, that I don't think any additional documentation is actually going to help anybody out. So I don't think that there would be much that I have to do to write it. Maybe I'd give an example, but we don't have time for this right now anyway. So if I'm doing this in I'm going to make detail.js in common.js. Detail test is actually going to get the component itself. That's going to be the export. And I want to test its view model, which is it just put as .view model? I can't remember, or is it .prototype.view model? Hold on, let me look it up.
What do you mean? I thought you're going to you're going to export the component?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's prototype view model.
Yeah, I think there's another place it sticks it though. So hold on one second while I remember what this is. I guess you don't need. I'm just going to export the view model. That just makes it easier. So.
Yeah, if you're doing it all in one file, I usually just export the view model.
Yeah. Okay. So I need to create a module. And I'm going to call it, what?
The QUnit module.
QUnit module, right? This is kind of like a grouping of tests. What I tend to do is put the module name that I'm actually testing. And then I'm going to write a test. I'm going to say, oh, I need fixtures in here, which I'll get in a second. I'm going to just say, for this, I'm just going to say basics of player promise and player properties. And what I'm going to do is create a new view model, detail view model, with the ID that our fixtures support.
Oh, they don't have the link to the Hangout. I'll find that.
Oh, it's in the it is in the calendar.
It's in the calendar, okay.
Yeah, so that's where. So here's, if you go to blog.bitovi.com, free weekly training, this calendar. We always put the Hangout links right here.
Oh, there you go. Fast.
Okay, so I created the detail view model, and now I really want to just wait till there is a player promise. There should be actually a player promise immediately, but there won't be a player till sometime later. So I can kind of test all of these things. I'm going to do an async test. So I'm going to I need to call stop in QUnit. I could also write async test up here. This just lets QUnit know to wait until you call start. So I'm going to do detail view model. And what I should be able to do is read the player promise property. Oh, this should be player ID. I'll read the player promise, and then I'm going to and then I could just do a then, and I could just make sure I get a player with whatever the name of the player is in our fixture, which is Joe Bobo. Hopefully there's nobody named Joe Bobo watching this right now, and if you are, my apologies for laughing at you.
Deeply offended.
You're gonna email tomorrow like a letter, letter in blood.
How dare you?
Yeah.
Signed, Joe Bobo.
I'm the 6th generation Joe Bobo. My dad was a Euro. Okay, so player, I'm gonna read their name and make sure that it is indeed the world famous Joe Bobo. And then what I can also do, that's kind of asynchronous, but I'm also going to do detail view model.atter. What I want to do is listen to when the player property is set. So I'm going to bind when player is set. I'm going to kind of do the same thing in here. I just want to see that like the player value is actually going to change once the player promise is resolved. And I'm going to write player. And then here is where I'll start. It doesn't really matter where I'm doing it, either here or there. I think I'll stop twice with QUnit. I think you might be able to, and I think then this is the better way of doing it.
Yeah, just sets a count, right?
I think so. Okay, so yay, there we go. That's what the test looks like. Now I'm going to implement a dumb component. So we got a test. Oh, I got to build something that loads this test. So I'm going to make a test.html page.
That's what I always do. Is I mean, a lot of people don't like writing tests, but I find it really satisfying to like get the red failure, implement it, get green. It's a very satisfying way to develop, I think.
Yeah. Are there like light switches you like to switch on and off before bed too? No, it's a really good idea. I agree. It is satisfying, like popping wrapping, or what they call the bubble wrap.
I wouldn't think about it like that. Okay.
Maybe you should. All right, so we're gonna load. So all we have to do really to create a test page is point at Steele and point at
Test page.
The test module, which is bitballs components player detail. And And then you can also give it a title, which is good. And what I always just do is give it a title from the actual detailed test. I just give it the same kind of thing right here, and then add the word tests after it. And the component generator generates all this for you, so you don't have to write it. But I do like how, it's so lightweight that you can kind of write it yourself without much hassle. So here now we've got our detail view model. I'm still going to export this. And that is, I'm going to require cam.js. Have it. I think that's all we need. We can kind of look at what happens with our detailed test now. Something it doesn't like.
404.
Let's see where that is. Components, player, detail. Okay, that's because I'm sure I have in my detailed test. Oh, no. Hold on. What is loading that? That's going to be breaking.
It might be the test page, or no?
Probably the test page, yeah. Oh, player, detail, detail, test. There you go.
Yeah. So did you tell them about the / extension with Steel?
I have not. Hopefully they've seen that from other things, but yeah. Essentially the /. Oh, but it's good to mention now. That's a good point because it does, like, it's specifically designed to deal with modlets. So if you have this /, so modlets, we always have detailed JS inside the detail folder, right? And you don't always want to have to write bitballs, components, player, detail. You don't always tack on an extra detail to load the module. So what we've done is if you ever have / essentially, it's just modifying it to say super again. So that's why in what was it? In our test page, or in our demo page, that's why we can load can view auto render /. That's why here we just could write player detail /. We didn't have to add on this, which is very nice. Okay, so let me load my test page. And again, actually, I think it showed. The problem is there is no then of undefined because we haven't actually implemented the promise. So I'm going to do that. And I'm just going to make it, so we'll need the player model. And then we will need to, we'll need a getter. And what I'm going to make this getter do is read the player ID property. And if there's a player ID, if it's not equal to undefined, or null, then it's going to return a player.get with that as the ID. And get that player.
Player get returns a promise.
Yeah, player get returns a promise. Player is going to work pretty similar. It's just going to check player promise. And if there's a player promise, then what it's going to do is use the async version of this. So there's the last set value, which is going to be always undefined because nobody's setting directly the player property. Although there are cases where you want that, but not here. And then now we're going to call this thing resolve. This used to be called set value, but it was kind of confusing. So I think calling it resolve now is a better name.
See, I was wondering how you would do this because this exact thing is I want to have a promise on my view model and I also want a player.
Yeah.
So use the async form of the getter. Okay.
Yeah, so this is kind of how I've done this in the past is, well, then when player promise is resolved successfully, I get a player, and then I can just resolve with the player.
Cool.
The value here. Now, a shorthand, you can just pass this because the first argument is the player, and you need to call resolve with the player as the first argument. You can just make this a little bit shorter like this. So that is a nice way of doing it. Cool. So with that, I think we do need one other thing for our test, which is to make sure we get our fixture. And with that, see if our view model passes. What did I do wrong? Let's see here. Require is not, oh,
I'm gonna mix.
yeah, can't mix. You cannot cross the streams, and you cannot mix module formats.
In the same file. You can in the same project.
Same file. All right, so something is not working. It's probably some of my promisey logic. Let's take a look at the test and see which of these two functions is not being called. If I had to guess, it's probably 22. It's possible that the fixture is not working, that seems to be the
Either
case.
one.
Let's see if the view model methods are getting called here. Oh, you know what? I don't have the define plugin.
Oh, yeah.
That is included in 2.3 by default, so.
Oh, it is. I didn't know that. Okay.
I thought it is. David would know more, but I think that was a plan.
With can map or with which can?
When you pull in can map, it will pull in the define plugin. It's definitely the plan for 3.0. I thought we just said, let's just do it now because everybody uses it. It's like,
yeah.
Okay, so let's still not going, but let's see if these methods are at least getting called here. Actually, I know why these methods aren't getting called. At least I know why. Because we're not passing it. Oh, maybe this one is getting called. Let's see here. Player ID 1. That's good. Now it should do the player get. And we should hit our fixture, which, why is it, am I not models, fixtures, player? Can I set a breakpoint here? Or do I have to set it in the eval one? I'll set it in both. Okay, that's cool. So let's see. I'm not seeing a fixture get hit. So I think the problem.
Fixtures aren't working.
There's no network request though. Oh, there is a network request. Yep. That's the problem. Okay. So why aren't fixtures getting hit? I am not sure.
Are you importing them into the test?
I am importing. That's what I did here.
Okay.
Fixtures player. So let's check this out.
By the way, you're using can util fixture.
Bad. Okay, so this is, I just realized this is not a fixture. This is a fixture for a list, not a fixture for a single item. So that's the problem. So let me change that. That's the problem right there. Oop. So we're going to make it for a single item. Matthew, were you saying something or?
I think it was, but I don't remember. So.
Okay. All right. So here, now we're going to return for player ID 1. And let's see here. We're a little bit more successful this time. Let's see if we at least hit the fixture. We're hitting all that stuff. You're hitting the fixture.
Yay.
Hopefully getting Joe Bob. Yep. Oh man. Oh, I don't know why the request was made twice. Actually, I do have an idea why the request was made twice, but oh, Player.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so because
Player.adder is not a function.
yeah, I think
Wait, you don't.
I know what the problem is. This is the problem with async setters.
Okay.
So this is one of those things that everybody. It's not a problem unless you're doing tests, because the problem is if I move this first, it works. The reason is because what it's doing here is it's calling the asynchronous getter, but it's not bound, right? So it's just going to get the value, right? And then when this does its binding, it's going to recall player promise again and get the value. So you always need to bind on any properties that are asynchronous getters if you're going to kind of start reading them, and you want them to behave like how they should. So it's not going to call player promise multiple times, right?
Oh, so it's calling it the first time before player promise. I think I understand. Yeah,
it's calling it's getting the value of player promise, but it's not saving it because it's that property isn't bound to, right? Player promise isn't bound to. Then it's when player calculates itself, it calls player promise again, it gets a new value. So that's why everything was called multiple times, and that's why player initially was going to be undefined. So with doing it this way, it should be fixed, I think. All right, still a problem. Oh, did I not save?
Mohammed asks, how does the view model fire saved event? Isn't there a new saved event? I think that's what he's asking about.
Still, okay, so problem is this is still going to be undefined at first. So we kind of need two then. So what we'll do is just if player. How does model what?
He's asking about the saved event. I guess he's asking if the model fires a saved event. We're not doing any saving, so.
Okay, something is wrong here. Hold on one second. Let me figure out what's going on wrong with the test, and then we will get to that question. So, that's what the problem is. Okay, because you're listening to an event, so it's an event. I wonder why.
There you go.
I probably don't need this if. It's like I was kind of being confused why I needed that. Hey, we have a player, and he is Joe Bobo. Yay, and our tests all pass. Okay.
Nice.
So there is no like saved event. There is no there is created events and updated events, and those will fire after a successful create request or a successful, like essentially after a successful save or update. But there's no saved property. There is new. So models have a observable is new, which essentially you can check if it's saved or not, right? Like if it's saved to the server. Now, whether you can check if there's dirty changes, things that haven't been made or are made, there's a backup plugin that can help with that. But model itself, there's no way to know that like something was recently saved, but there is to know whether it's actually been saved ever to the server. No, there is no saved. There might be a saved method on like.
There could be an
we might be
there could be
an event when they're saved.
Yeah.
I think we do that. I've shown how to like trigger a saved event on a view model, but that's not something that models do themselves. Now you can listen to created event or updated event or both, and you would get the same information.
I think that's what he's asking is just how does that saved event happen? Like you're calling on the view model. What are you calling? Can trigger this saved?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But
That's what he's asking.
yeah, I forgot. That's somewhere in here. I don't know where I'm doing that. Maybe it's in edit here. Okay, in edit. You don't have to do it this way anymore. It's kind of one way I was doing But yeah, in here now with 2, 3, I could do this dot dispatch. I wanted a when the player is actually saved. I could do saved or something. I can dispatch my own event on the view model. I could, if this has a. The problem with this example is that the player is loaded via. I thought. Wait, where is the? Oh, maybe the player is passed. So the player is probably a passed property on the view model. So you could, if you wanted to wire things up in a very weird way, do. Oh, that must be happening inside here. Oh, that's what. So you're seeing this saved and canceled, but those are happening. Let's look at the view model here. So those are just triggered events. Those aren't. Yeah, they're just dispatched events. They're not. They're not something the model is actually doing. Now, in reality, this didn't have to be written this way at all. It's kind of. It could have just been written on the view model because you could have been listening on the player. You could have listened on created, and you could have probably created another one for updated. And then you would trigger a saved event so that other thing people could bubble. But right now there is no saved event. There's just created and updated, and essentially wiring that up itself. All right.
Cool. So modlets. So we got a test.
We got to test. Let's get the demo page going real quick. Because I don't think we're going to be able to get the packages today. I think we'll skip that and maybe shift that to next week. So what I do want to show is the actual detail page working. So to do that, our detail page actually needs a component. So I'm going to create a component.
Oh, those things.
All those things, yeah. I'm going to create a component, and I'm going to give it a tag of player detail. I'm going to say its view model is this detail view model. And I'm going to give it a template, which I'm going to create a template file, detail.stash. And here I'm just going to give maybe I'll give an H1 with, well, what I eventually wanted to do was create like a little loading custom element. Eventually what I want to be able to do for my NPM package is be able to have some kind of element like super spinner or something. And I can just pass it a promise equals a promise. And that will, in this case, I'd pass it promise is equal to player promise. And all this will do is just show a spinner while the player promise is not, while it's not resolved. And maybe I could make super spinner like show the error if it errored or something like that. That's what we'll make next week.
So just to explain the syntax here, your one-way binding on the super spinner's promise view model property, the player promise.
I would phrase that the opposite way. I'm one-way binding the player promise from the player details view model into super spinner's promise property. Yeah, the direction goes from this to this.
So when I converted my app, I just made everything two-way, just because that's the way it's been. Are you now thinking more about it?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I do one way now a lot more because I find that I don't know. I just think it's
That's what you
safer. There's less bindings that get set up too. So there's actually like some performance benefits a little bit, like not much, but we don't have to do a binding on this and set it up to update this.
Mhm.
So that's nice. And I just like, I'm just certain that, hey, super spinner, too bad. You don't have the ability to mess around with anything going on the outside. So I think it's nice because I can kind of tell directional flow a little bit just by looking now at a component. I can say like, oh, this person is probably intending this. They might actually change the promise and update what the player is. That's weird. Like, why the hell would someone want to do that?
Yeah.
It's kind of nicely informative, I think. But anyways, we're gonna do that next week. So I'm gonna blow that away for right now. And for now, what I'm gonna do is say something like, I want to show a spinner. So I'm gonna do something like, I'm gonna get my player promise. I'm gonna say if it's pending. And I'm gonna say like loading in italics or something. And then if, I need this as an if. And then what I might do is projected. I'd be like, I'm not really saving. In an ideal world here, I might have like a rejected thing that what is it? It's the reason. So I could actually write out the player promise dot reason. And this would be whatever data the server sent back is like an object. So there might be like message on here. And then finally, if it's resolved, now I could use the fancy case, but I'm afraid of it right now because this is old version and it's not totally working until now. If it's rejected, and then if it's resolved, then I want to say like the person's name. So I'll just do like H1 player is, and then we'll hopefully get, what was it, Joe Bobo?
Joe Bobo.
Player.name. I can just use the shorthand to close these things like that. And so I need to load this template. So I could be kind of keep all my requires up here, which I do in an actual application, but just because I think it's kind of cool, I'm gonna load the stash template right here. So I'm gonna load detail.stash, and I'm gonna follow it up with a bang so that it knows it's a custom element. Or sorry, it's not a JavaScript module. It has a different type. That's why I have the bang.
By the way, in 0.12, the bang was no longer required.
I saw that. Now it's still it's still in all module formats, or
it's not required if there's an ext config for it.
Even in ES6.
Yes.
Wow, cool.
The test is in ES6, yeah.
Awesome. But I have not upgraded, so I still need this. That's nice that's good for backwards compatibility.
Yeah.
Most thing people will have to do. So now I have my test. Let's go to my demo page, which is detail. Let's watch this break, which I'm sure it will. View model is not a function. What? Hold on, why? Player. There it is. Close it on the others. Template. Yes, it is. Why are you saying that? Oh, you know why? Because it's not. Well, I'm surprised can view auto render doesn't import enough to get the view model function. I thought I fixed this. Oh, I did fix this, but this is okay. I did fix this in latest CanJS, but I don't have latest CanJS, so I'm just gonna import can.
Component.
Oh, I could do can component, but I'm just going to import can. It doesn't really matter. Player is Jobo. Now we didn't see that. That was so fast with the. Which kind of is lame.
Trying to see.
I want to see that the pending actually showed up.
Oh, well, can't you set the fixture?
That's what I'm going to do.
All right.
Yeah. Good idea. From can util fixture. So here I'm going to load fixtures, and I'm going to set their delay to, let's do to 2 seconds. Can util fixture slash. That did not work. Why is that not working? Reason I didn't. It's weird that it's working, but not hitting the delays. That's what confuses me a little bit. I must have wrote something wrong here, maybe? Let me just make sure that normally this shouldn't matter, but because why would it even get to player promise resolved?
Wait, are those helpers or are they properties?
They're like magic properties.
Well, I guess it doesn't matter in this case.
What's really weird is, oh, you know what? This is a supermodel.
Okay.
So because it's a supermodel loaded from the cache, loading from local storage, so that's why we don't see it. So now it should work.
That's a good problem, though. It's like the models are so nice.
Yeah, the models are so nice that you're like, why isn't it running slow? And you're like, oh yeah, that's why. So to see it running slow, yeah, I could just clear local storage, and then that makes sure that the model finds nothing at first. So we get the loading for 2 seconds, and then you see player is Jobo. Yeah, that's a fun problem, but that is going to trip some people up, I think. I don't know. Maybe warnings like let people know sometimes, I don't know, that it's found in the cache. I don't know. But then that you could get a lot of that, and that would get annoying after a while.
Or you could maybe we could have can connect local storage, know that if fixtures are on somehow, not to do it or something. I don't know.
Oh yeah, maybe. But you might want to see this behavior with fixtures too, just to make sure it's going right. Anyways, so that's modlets. We didn't get to npm packages. We'll save that for next week. But hopefully it kind of shows how this is a big part of what we do at Bitovi is, we always have a test and demo page. The test page is very important, but the demo page is also nice because like sometimes we'll add let's see here. So we'll add functionality and kind of controls that will test different cases that aren't easily tested, like combinations that if we're not hitting every single combination it can sometimes be very hard to write a test script that tests and verifies every single combination of options that a component can be passed, right? Let's say that there's like player detail takes an ID, but then let's say it also takes like, I don't know, like what type of athlete it is, or whether they've donated, or whether they've signed in, and whether it's the current user, or all of these different options. And player detail page is supposed to respond differently to like, there's kind of 5 different values that are getting passed, and each one of those 5 different values can have like either 2 or 3 different other values. Then you have like 17 combinations, right? And yes, absolutely, you should test all of those, but that can take a very long time. And sometimes you're prototyping and you just don't have the time to like write all those tests out right away. what we'll do in these cases is like I'll create a select.
Emmanuel did this when he had a button that had like 30 something different ways the button could look. So he had a demo page that allowed you to see all of them.
Yeah, so what I might have is the local storage stuff is documented.
Can connect.
It's part of Can Connect.
I'll send you the docs.
Yeah. To be clear, I'm not using Can Model. I'm using Can Connect Supermodel. So you might want to send the link to Supermodel's docs to Matthew, which details which plugins. Supermodel pretty much uses everything that Can Connect can use reasonably. It doesn't use like cache. It uses a full cache, but it doesn't use cache the connection, but it uses pretty much everything else besides cache connection. So I want to I might want to like two-way bind the selects value to the player ID or to the ID property in the scope, and I could use the new, if I had the new CanJS 2.3 fully updated, I could do something like this. Although, and then I could just put in a bunch of options with value equals 1, and this way I could give potentially, like, I could put in things that don't make any sense, like I could put an empty string, and then I could put in things like IDs that are valid that don't give a, but there's nothing there. For player, right? And this way, yeah, I should absolutely write a test for all of these. But once you have a lot of these different combinations, so there might be the ID and there might be the player type that you might want to pass here, and whether they're logged in or not, and all of these different options, maybe a whole crazy bunch of stuff is supposed to happen. It's nice in a demo page to be able to quickly combine all of that. What's missing, Docs? Supermodel?
Oh no, he was sharing that he had in one of his, when he does meetups, and he had the Modlet folder as well.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we're gonna end it there. If Sheriff has any more any questions that he wants to ask, but we can stick around for a few more minutes and ask. But I think we're done going through this example.
All right. So next week, are we gonna make an npm package out of this, or?
We're not gonna make an npm package out of this. We're gonna make that like super spinner.
Okay.
And then we'll import it, and we'll just have like a little spinner that goes off while the player promise is loading. A very simple thing, but we'll show how like kind of modlets can be imported to the to their own repository, get tests. I think we'll even talk about how to do a dist a little bit, like our NPM scripts that do pre, post publish and all of that kind of stuff. So you get the ideal publishing scenario.
Tag and all that.
And then how to import that into our project, which is pretty cool. To me, it's really cool if you can make a separate project and set it up in a different repository and import it into your project within an hour, right? If you can do it within an hour, then a lot of the stuff that you're probably all just sticking in another repository, sometimes that stuff does become worth it to pop on out, right? So you can share it with the greater CanJS community and Done.js community, make it all stronger.
Awesome.
Cool. So are you wearing a Toby shirt right now, like I am?
Oh, of course.
Nice. Of course, get the Toby shirt.
I can just wear this every day and no one will know.
It's true. So. It's true. That's a good thing about working from home.
Yeah.
So cool. Thank you, Matthew. Thanks everybody who was watching, and we will see you next week.
All right. Bye, everyone.